Hello and welcome to this little session. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Robert from Active Gaming Media and I'm from Japan. Well, I might not look like a Japanese, but I have been living in Japan for quite a long time, about 9 years now. And a big part of my work at Active Gaming Media has been to support foreign developers, foreign publishers to bring over their games to Japan and to culturalize them by using a wide variety of measures like localization, like customer support and community management. It also includes like operational support, adapting graphics, and up until marketing and other publishing-related things. And that's what I want to talk about today, basically about culturalizing games, what is important to look at, and what is important for Japan if you want to bring over your game and if you want to appeal to a local community. Before I go into details about and showing you a few things of what you really should look at, I would like to give you a quick overview about the Japanese market. Probably everyone knows and wants to go to Japan because it used to be the #1 market for mobile games in the world. Right now it's China, but still together with the US, Japan accumulates, for example, for 75% of the iOS revenue. It has a very high penetration of mobile devices, of smartphones. Gaming on mobile devices is very normal in Japan. Like almost everyone plays. The market size is pretty big, and the good thing about Japan is that it monetizes very well on both devices. On both platforms, on Android and iOS, and it is still the market with the highest ARPU in the world. It's about like the double of the US and China. However, of course, everyone probably has the same image. It's very hard to get into the Japanese market, into the Asian market in general. And there are certain characteristics that makes it a very unique market. For example, about 90% of the content you will find in the ranking is actually created by local publishers and developers. The top 10 games accumulate for about 50% of the overall revenue, which makes it very lucrative to get into the top 10, but also shows like the gap between everything that comes afterwards. Japanese players also are very loyal, I have to say. Loyal also in terms of what they like, what they dislike, and they usually stick to what they have been playing, and they continue to play in the same genre, which is still a big part is RPGs in Japan, as well as casual games or like combined genres between those. Japanese gamers also play a lot. Usually they play during commute, rather short-term sessions, but over the day they do play a lot, and of course they monetize a lot as well, as we just saw. Now the question is, since it is a very mature market, players are very high demand, they have very high demands, and they have those special likes. What can you do? Generally speaking, it's very costly to operate a game in Japan because you have the high competition. Everyone wants to get a piece of the revenue, of the high revenue, but that makes it very competitive, and it's very high. Because of the high demands of the users, usually the operation costs are very high, as well as the user acquisition costs. Now we have seen some changes in the market, also from Japanese publishers. They are kind of scaling down, and that's basically what you would need to do as a foreign developer in Japan as well. You need to focus on the core community, on the core users, try to satisfy their needs, and basically culturalize your content. When it comes to culturalization, the question is, what can you do? Of course, there's a lot of things that you can do, probably things you already have thought about, or things that apply to the whole game development and publishing process. So it starts, for example, with localizing the App Store description. It goes into localizing the game. It goes to adapting the graphics towards the needs of the users. It goes applying a special operational strategy, so event management and things like that, and eventually tweaking certain game mechanics in the game that are more favorable for the local users. And of course, it also you're going to need a very special targeted PR marketing strategy. The first step you would want to look at is, do you actually have a good game or not? If you have good KPI in another market, it's very likely that you can do well in Japan as well. Now, what makes a good game? Of course, if it's innovative, if it has an addictive point to it, if it is of really high quality, maybe if you have like using a certain IP or certain characters, it might work well. Or if it has a certain niche value, then you have a good start already. Then you might also be able to appeal to the Japanese users. A good example would be the Minions. It is a very well-known IP, of course, all over the world, but in Japan especially because it features like really cute characters, and that's what the Japanese players like. It is a global IP already, so the game, I'm pretty sure, is successful revenue-wise. I don't have any metrics for that, but if you look at the ranking, the game is well received. Now, if your game falls under one of those categories, the next thing you would want to do is appeal to the user by localizing the first entry point, which usually is the App Store. Probably lots of you already have done that, so I don't want to go too much into detail, but what you want to do is, of course, localize the description, localize anything that is related, for example, the in-app product names, maybe the videos, the store assets, the icon, but also the game title. I think that the game title is very important, because it's like the very first thing the user is going to see, and you might want to get a little bit creative here. That's something what we did, for example, for one of our clients with the title My Country 2020. We translated the title in Japanese into Mirai Toshi, which means actually not my country, but future city. We thought that this is a little bit better, more creative things, and drives a little bit more attention, and also uses keywords that are more favorable for the genre in the App Store. Now, I just mentioned that you want to localize your art assets in the store as well. And I've put together a few examples from Netmarble, where we heard yesterday actually a very good talk here at Casual Connect. And I have to say they are doing a very great job. If you look at the art assets, for example, the English screenshots, they are very different from what you see in the Chinese, Japanese, or Korean market. The English one, for example, is a little bit more confronting. It has a text that is a call for action, and that is something that you see very often in English, in the English market and on English screenshots. If you compare that to the Japanese one, you're going to see that there's way more text on the Japanese screenshot. This text is also differently written. You're going to see, you will, at least what is written there is like they present the merits of the game. They talk, for example, about the storyline here, about the amount of characters they have, as well as below they have the voice actors that are being featured in the game, which is very important as well, because you're going to drive attention from people who like the voice actors. Voice actors are kind of famous, like idols in Japan, and they have their own blog. They're going to talk about it, so you're going to get the collaboration from those people. And if you features on the screenshot, you drive more attention towards your game. The same applies actually to the icon. Netmarble has done a good job here as well. From a Western perspective, you might not see the difference, but inside the Asian countries, there is a difference to the art style. So, for example, the left icon is a very typical Chinese-looking character, I have to say. This is the icon that is been used in the Chinese market as well as in the English market, while on the right side is the one that you find in the Japanese market. It's a female character which caters more towards the core community, which is likely a male community, and the art style is also more Japanese-looking than Chinese-looking. So you're gonna get again, like you connect better to the local community. What you also find very often in Japan is that they're gonna use icons with a frame inside. Users are used to that because Puzzle and Dragons started to use that a long time ago, and basically all the other companies just copied that. So you might want to consider to do the same. Now, if you have already localized the App Store, you might, of course, also want to consider the localization of the game title. Why is that? Because Japanese players actually don't speak any English. So even if you got them so far to read the description, to install the game, they might just delete the game right after they get into an English-speaking application. So you want to make sure that you localize all aspects of the game, which is, of course, like all the in-game text with item descriptions, character names, storyline, etc., but also like other parts which are like background graphics or the UI and things like that. Now, what is important to think about when you localize a game into Japanese is that you have to take more time. Japanese is a contextual language. That means depending on the context of the characters, for example, the words that you use for the localization is going to change. A good example would be the simple word "you." There's so many ways how to translate that that it requires a lot of research by the translator in advance, trying to familiarize with the game and finding out like what the game is basically about or what kind of background the characters have. Because depending on, for example, the speaker's age in a dialogue, the speaker's age or the listener's age, or the relationship between the speaker and the listener, as well as the social status, the word you might want that is being used will change. So in order to avoid any sort of mistranslation or flat translation, you have to get that right, or the translator has to get that right. Otherwise, you might end up having an old guy character in the game that actually speaks like a schoolgirl, and that might be a little bit weird. Now, graphics and art. Probably if you look at the games in the App Store in Japan or on Google Play, you're going to notice that the art style is completely different. And that's something that you have to figure out for yourself as well. To which degree do I actually want to culturalize that point? To which degree does it make sense? But if we, for example, look at the ranking and look what kind of foreign games are popular, then you're going to find games that, for example, feature a manga and anime look. So games that look Japanese, or games that are rather cute, colorful, and have a cartoony style to it. But also games that have a clean design, a very simple design that comes from the Japanese culture. They like this sort of design, so that's very likely that you're going to get attention with that as well. And of course, as I mentioned, the use of characters, but also the use of certain themes and styles gonna attract more attention. For example, dragon-themed games or robot-themed games usually have a higher connection to the Japanese players, and they might want to try the game out. Now, again, a good example for the culturalization of art assets is Netmarble. They, as I mentioned, they do a really good job. And what they did for one of their titles, Evil Bane, is that they localized a lot of aspects. It's actually not only the art assets or the icons as we saw before, they also localized the name, for example. It's completely different. It's called Raven in Japan. And what they did with the art assets is that while it's a 3D game, and of course it economically doesn't make any sense to localize the 3D parts, they did take the 2D characters and created art that is Japanese art totally. They also changed, for example, on the home screen, they changed the background picture from a more darker themed picture to a more brighter themed picture. It's a different picture. It's also a different layout of the buttons, of the UI in general, and they introduced a character that you can only find in the Asian version, which is very cute and is very common in Japan as well, because people just like cute things, and if you have a character that greets the user, they feel more connected right away. Now, the other really important thing, and probably the key element in Japan, is actually operation. When you look at games in Japan or in Asia in general, you're going to notice that even up on release, the games usually have way more content. They have tons of events. They have they try to really reach out to the community by using very extensive community management and customer support. And that works way better in Japan because, as I mentioned in the beginning, the users are very mature. They have very high demands, and they expect you to connect to them very deeply. So a good example here is Clash of Kings, actually. They do in Japan use the SNSs very extensively. They talk about all the events that are happening in-game, any sort of collaboration. So here, for example, with some famous idols, which again gonna tweet about the game and connect to their fans to play the game. Or they also, from time to time, you're gonna see them holding offline events, inviting people to, for example, just recently to a Halloween party in Tokyo, and they give away free gifts. So they have this really close relationship to the users, and that is what the users expect, and that is what works way better in Japan and Asia. Now, if you want to do operation in Japan, it's very important to prepare very carefully for that, and maybe check out a few games in Japan as well, what kind of types of events and operations they do. You will find probably tons of different types of events. There are maybe like 40 or even more different types. But to give you a quick overview of the most common ones, you're going to see a lot of time-limited events, which means that the publisher or the game is going to reward the user by joining an event, for example, clearing a quest within a limited period of time. So let's say like there are monthly events, there are weekly events, there are also daily events. If you join this quest, if you clear the quest, then you're going to receive a special item, maybe a rare character, or any other in-game rewards. This goes even that far that there are certain types that are called guerrilla events. These are very often unexpected events. So maybe in social media, they suddenly tweet about the event where the event is going to take place, let's say, tomorrow from 2 to 3. And only during this time, the user can get the item or the character that he really wants. And of course, it's kind of difficult to clear the quest as well. So it's very likely that the user is going to put down money to actually clear the quest and speed up the process. Other events are, for example, social media events and gift campaigns. Very common in Asia and in Japan are pre-registration events. That means that before the game is launched, you're going to have a sign-up page, and every user who signs up is going to receive a special gift. If the amount of users exceeds a certain amount, let's say 2,000 users, then all the users get another gift. So it also encourages the users to share the pre-registration with their friends in order to get this special item they want. And that is also very often used only as a social media event. So again, like maybe the time-limited event in combination with the social media event, you get something if you tweet about it. Another thing that's something that's common in the West as well, sales events. So you just get, let's say like the assets, the items in the store are off during a certain time, or a gacha event where a user can get a certain item, a rare item, only during the time of the gacha event, or the probability of getting a rare or super rare character will increase during that time. So again, that will lead to more monetization with the user. And another very important thing are collaboration events. So here, for example, Puzzle and Dragons did a collaboration with the Rovio characters of Angry Birds, where the user can get an Angry Birds character if he clears the quest of this special dungeon. As well, you will find other mutual events, like, for example, Mobio Final Fantasy did a collaboration with Dragon Quest in both games, so it's a cross-promotion kind of thing. And sometimes it also works with offline industries, so again, like, for example, with an Idol. And at the same time, these kind of campaigns and events are being advertised in TV, which, again, engages more to the user and makes sure that the user gets there right in time. There are a little bit more things you might want to consider if you localize or culturalize your game in Japan. I don't want to go too much into detail for this, but just a quick overview. Japanese players usually like very easy and intuitive UIs with more submenus. That means that they prefer to click rather than see everything on one screen. They also like the easy controls. Yesterday in the NetMobile talk, it also came up. Autoplay is one thing that users are used to, as well as extensive tutorials. They like to be introduced to the game very carefully. And since the users usually play while commuting, also like playing in vertical mode is more important than on horizontal, and short time plan sessions. I think I mentioned that before. The very last thing I want to mention is, of course, marketing and PR should also have a local strategy. But in order to apply that, you might want to go with a local partner, because that is something that is extremely difficult. And Japan is a country where TV advertisement plays a very big role. So that's very likely that you might not be able to do that unless you have a partner. And the way how they market their games is also very different. And as a last thing, I would like to show you how different Japan is and how they market it by taking a look at this video. So yeah, that's my last thing to say. If you want to localize and culturalize your games, please consider a lot of things, starting from localization up until marketing. But in any case, you might want to work with a partner. And it's very important to really get the localization and the culturalization right. Otherwise, you might not get the attention of the user. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. And I have a question now.
Please.
So you spoke about the tactics, how to localize games, and let's try to speak about the future. Mm-hmm. So internet connected the people and globalization and so on. So what do you think if the kids won't demand that specific localization? Could it happen or not?
Yes, I think so. So that's what we have been seeing over the last 1 to 2 years, I have to say. Like the Japanese market always has been very attractive, of course, for foreign companies. But it's also a very competitive one. So that's why we saw like these trends I tried to show here as a request from our clients, actually. And the localization needs has been increased, especially with tweaking all aspects of the game. So I pretty much think that this is going to be the future in Japan as well, that foreign developers will look more into the details on how to really, well, almost perfectly gonna localize their titles.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hello.
Hi.
I have one question. What about the Japanese market? I know the Japanese game market is very close to... they want to be open their world, or they just close it like to now?
You mean the Japanese developers and publishers?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. So far, most of the developers and publishers have been focusing on their own market, I have to say. It comes from this special market itself because the Japanese gamers have their own needs, and the Japanese publishers, of course, they know how to cater towards this community. So that's their speciality, but the market is very competitive. So even the Japanese publishers, they have, let's say, a little bit of troubles to retain their status, and I think that more and more are going to look overseas. However, their games are also not super suited for the foreign markets. So whether they are gonna apply the same techniques to culturalize the games or not, that's something I cannot say. But I see more tendencies, and I see the publishers being more open towards the foreign markets as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
so
you very
much.
much.